Welcome to the Writer Reads Short Stories, The Starman's Arrival, Part 3. He was different to the bandits. Does the Starman live? I don't know. He disappeared when I ran. What did you do? I broke the beer. Beer? I stared at the spider. How did one explain alcohol to a creature that turned its prey to fluid? The day, the enormity of what I was to the spider, the impossibility of the device in my hand, it all hit me, flowing over me like a wave, and my knees gave way. This time the spider's chitter held an impatient rattle, and I glanced at the screen. You will come with us. Movement followed the words, and I looked up. One of the huge creatures had moved to stand beside me. The appendage it extended from below its jaw looked surprisingly like an arm, complete with a long clawed hand on the end. But all I could see were the fangs beyond. I screamed and pushed off the ground, angling up and away from the monster beside me. I hit the hard-edged limbs of the one standing behind me and elicited a startled hiss at the impact. Off balance, I ricocheted into the first creature and then ended up on the ground at its feet. A clawed foot was pulled out from under me, then placed firmly across my shoulder and chest. I wriggled, but that only made the foot heavier. More chittering, a louder hiss, and fangs loomed over me, the tear marks running down them etched with blue. I didn't dare raise the hand with the gadget to see what they said, and I didn't dare resist when one of the underjaw hands grabbed my wrist and lifted the screen where I could see it. Where is the Starman? In the village? The words were out before I could think. Where? I don't know. Could he be out of the village? The thought stopped me cold, so I thought about it. In the end, I shook my head. No, there's only one way. He did not follow. Then the human that came through the hedge after you is a bandit? What human? You did not know you were followed. No, but the words gave me comfort. The bandits were not human. Close to us in form, but definitely not human. The hand around my wrist kept the device in sight. Is this human a bandit? More movement. A man grumbling, chitters and whistles that sounded like a warning, all followed by a very human sigh. I looked toward it, twisting my head around to look up, relieved when I was allowed to sit, the foot that had pinned me settled behind my back, lending its support as the Starman came into view. You, he said, and received a stern nudge from a foreleg. It did little to subdue him. Are you all right? No, I said. Then, this is not a bandit, and yes, I am all right. The man relaxed. After that no, he tensed up as though he was going to start a fight. Now he looked down at where I sat on the aqua-colored grass, and then he sat down facing me. What are these? He asked, gesturing at the spiders around us. They live in Blackleg's forest. Even as I spoke, I realized I might be insulting them, and I felt myself blush. Around us, the spiders chittered and whistled until, with a series of firm clicks, one of them brought the rest to silence. Yellow tears, I thought, noticing how the markings on their faces differed. I looked at the device. How did you hope he would help you? I looked at the Starman. I thought he might bring someone to free us from the bandits. The man laughed, but not like he saw anything funny. Sweetheart, we can't fight the pirates. The best we can do is send out an emergency beacon, and that only when I get back on board. I sighed and pushed down the disappointment threatening to overwhelm me. When will that be? He shrugged. Don't know. Bullet hit the transmitter. It's broke and I'm stranded. They won't come dirt side until I contact them by radio to tell them it's safe. Now I really did want to cry. It wasn't safe. It wasn't ever going to be safe. How how long will they wait? All emotion leached from his face and he glanced skyward. 2, maybe 3 orbits. We don't have supplies for longer. Oh. He reached toward me, perhaps to lay a comforting hand on my shoulder. I don't know. Either way, a fast-moving forklaw battered his hand down. Hey! He began, but the nearest arachnid hissed him to silence. He looked at me, then at the spiders, and shrugged. Yellow tears reached out a foreleg and touched me on the boot with a careful claw. I looked at the spider and then at the device as Yellow chittered. We can rid you of these bandits. The other spiders swiveled their heads toward her. I just stared. How do we tell them from the other members of your colony? Colony. At first I wondered how she had used that word, and then I remembered one of the researchers saying Blackleg's forest was home to a colony of the spider bugs. Perhaps the spiders thought of us as all one group. They're not human, I said. They look like us, but they're bigger. Their skins are thick and grey, and they have little pointy ears like this. And I put my ears up on either side of my head to show how the bandits' ears poked out from the top of their skulls. And they smell bad, I added. It was almost the truth. The bandits did smell different to humans, a kind of sour apple smell overlaid with mud. And their heads are squarish, and their teeth. I stopped, swallowed, tried not to remember that the chopping block had a practical use for the invaders. Their teeth are pointy. Vardigans, the Starman said, the word barely louder than a breath and holding more fear than I wanted to hear. You poor, poor people. He stopped when he realized he had the arachnid's total attention. Tell us of these Vardigans, Yellow Tears said, and I realized what the Starman had been holding tucked in the hand he'd kept close to his chest. It must have vibrated, for he glanced down and then up at the spider. All right, he replied, but the spider nearest him laid a claw on his shoulder, and he stopped. Watching them, I saw all the arachnids look upwards, and all raise one of their central legs. We must find shelter, flashed on my screen, even as I was lifted from the ground and tucked up against an arachnid chest. It was surprising how swiftly they could move using just 6 legs. Surprising, too, how securely I was held. I hadn't realized the legs had so many joints. We travelled, the world beyond the spider's body a blur of movement as they climbed into the trees and through a trellis of webs I hadn't noticed. Shortly after, I was deposited on a platform high in the forest canopy, with a series of chitters and whistles telling me to go inside. The Starman was taken through a thickly fibred tunnel to an even broader platform. Wait, I whispered, not wanting to be separated from the only other human I could see, but they didn't stop. I didn't move until the first fat drop of rain hit me hard in the middle of the forehead, and then I turned and hurried into the low crawl space the spiders had indicated. I wondered if there'd be any more inside, if the crawl space led to something bigger, and how long I'd be alone. To my surprise, the webs gave way to a smooth white surface that reflected a growing brightness from within, brightness and warmth. I crawled a little faster and found the crawl space expand as the ceiling arced upwards and the walls grew apart to surround a well-lit room. Slowly I stood and was greeted by a happy shout. Allie! Voice? But I'd barely got the question out before my brother's arms were around my waist and squeezing me in a delighted hug. Allie? My mother's voice was more cautious, but my father's greeting was filled with relief. So they did find you. Mum? Dad? Yes, they did. Are you okay? How long have you been here? Are you really okay? It took us some time to tell our stories, and we told them to the muffled roar of rain and thunder. We only stopped when the Starman emerged from the tunnel, slow and uncertain as he stood and took us in. They've gone, he said, just as my father demanded, Who are you? In the rain? I asked, but that's. They say it's only a little storm, the Starman replied, and we all flinched as thunder crashed around us. He looked at my father. I'm Macron Caville, he indicated me, your daughter? Dad nodded, and he continued, Your daughter saved my life. This brought a stern, disapproving glare from each of my parents. You silly girl! You could have been killed! But the Starman let them get no further. I would have been killed if she hadn't pushed over the crates of bottles. His words caused my parents to gasp in horror. You knocked over the beer? I blushed. It had been a really stupid thing to do, and I'd been lucky to escape. The Starman joined us at the table as my parents made me recount exactly what I'd done and how I'd gotten away. And then I learned how the Starman had survived.